We came just from your presentation of Ancestors. A really great looking game, really like it. And how the idea of Ancestors came up?
I'm not gonna lie to you, nobody on our dev team worked on any RDS before, so we're fresh to actually making an RDS game, but most of the members of our dev team are huge fans of RDS, and I mean ranging from guys who just play casually the single player, or even guys who play very hardcore StarCraft campaigns and StarCraft competitive missions, so that's where we feel safe, like being fans of RDS. I'm not a huge fan of RDS, so I really trust the dev team that I'm working with right now, and they're good at it. And I think you guys can see it for yourself when you show the game to the people. When I really want you to tell your viewers what you think about the game. So we're pretty confident about the feedback that we have, and we really like it. So the idea from Ancestors came from actually being fans of RDS, and the other one is the historical layer of the game, which is like trying to tell, trying to make a really decent real-time strategy game, but based on the background, which is a real historical events, and that's basically we call it a chocolate and peanut butter in one.
And what inspired Ancestors?
One thing is, as I've mentioned, being fans of RDS, but the other thing is, it's a history-inspired game, as we call it. So we try to make a game where, like, there's an important event in life of each faction, each nation that has its own campaign in the game. There are 4 nations in the game. There are Vikings, there are British, Germans, and Slavs, and each one of them has their own campaign that, as a background, it depicts a very important part of their history. Like the missions that we brought in here today, the build that guys can play in here today. This is part of the Viking campaign where Vikings have raided a famous British abbey called Lindisfarne, and this is considered on the pages of history to be the beginning of what is called the era of Viking raids. It took 300 years from then on. Everybody feared Vikings in Europe pretty much. They were raiding everybody. So it was a very important moment in Viking history. And we tried to do this for all of the factions, for the nations that we're going to be putting in our single player campaigns. Like, for example, Polish, one of the Slavic campaigns is the moment in history where Polish country was constituted, where first Polish king was crowned, and also it was the time where Polish transferred from being pagans to being Christians, and so on and so on. So that was the idea of trying to put history, very important elements of history, and put it in an RTS game. It's not something anybody has done, nobody has done before, but our twist is showing these historical events and really nice cinematic events in between the missions, narrated ones, so you can learn something from it. And when you're playing the actual missions, you're not, I mean usually, because sometimes you do, but usually you're not playing real historical characters, you're playing heroes that we, how to call this, that we kind of made up to gamify them. So that they're actually a cool playable characters, but they're historically accurate. Very important thing is when we make, like, take one of the heroes from the Viking campaigns that we're showing. His name is Ulf Ironbeard, and he's historically accurate. He's what actually one of the Jarls or the leaders of Vikings would look like, would feel like, would behave like, but he's a character that we created. So it's like the mixture, like a chocolate and peanut butter in one. That's what we try to do.
Okay, and the game is heavily inspired on history, and you mentioned the characters that gamified. I can learn something from this game. I can learn history. Am I right?
Yeah. That's the actual idea. The background of each of the campaigns, the single player campaigns that you're going to be playing, is telling the real pages of the history. Like I mentioned the raid on Lindisfarne. Between there are 5 missions of this campaign. Between each of the missions, there's a hand-drawn, really nicely animated cutscene that tells the story of what happens. And you can see how Vikings actually raided the Lindisfarne, why they did it, and what happened later, because it's actually a twist itself. They didn't actually possess the abbey, they actually robbed it, pillaged it, and they left. This is what Vikings did, so, you know.
Okay, and how many historical moments this game will cover up? Can you reveal this?
Each nation there are 4 nations, as I've mentioned already, and each of these nations is gonna have 2 campaigns, so that's 8 campaigns, and each campaign tells its own separate stories. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, stories for one nation, like 1 and 2nd story, they are chronologically linked, sometimes, but not always. But generally, you should treat it as 8 separate parallel stories.
And you have worked with big names, big companies. What experience you took from your previous projects on Ancestors?
I'm really happy to be working on RTS. That's something I can't bring into this team. They're really skilled in making RTS. I'm not. I mean, they're really good at it, from what you can see from the game. What I can bring is actually, I've worked on bigger projects than this. So it's actually the first time in my life where I'm working in a project where I can talk to any single member of the dev team every day. It's a new thing for me. It's great. It's something I have not experienced before, and I can try to see how the project is going on a daily basis. It's easier working in an indie studio. That's one thing that I'm really grateful for. And of course, I try to help communicate the game. We have just recently released our first longer, more extensive gameplay video from Ancestors Legacy. That's the name of the game. And I try to in this video I try to talk about the most important features of the game. So one thing is we're multi-platform. This game is playable on PC and Xbox One, and I was actually playing on PC and I was using a gamepad controller. So that is a very important thing to explain, because a lot of people think that making a game that is for PC and console, making a real-time strategy game, requires simplifying that. I think they're going to be surprised. I'm not saying that we can do a typical PC keyboard and mouse only RTS on a console, but still, I'm going to hold on to my word that people are going to be surprised seeing how console and even the PC gamepad control works in this game, because I've had enough good feedback about it that I'm pretty confident that it's not going to be what you can call a dumbed down version of the game for the console peasants. I'm just kidding. That's one thing. And the other thing is actually communicating the features of the game. It's a complex game. It's what an RTS should be. So it's a lot of work. And I think it's a great team, and they deserve to have these features and elements of the game laid down for people who are going to be trying to see what Ancestors Legacy is. I'm happy to do that.
While watching the presentation for single player, I got a question. Can my units go against my commands?
Yes and no. I mean, your units are your subordinates. You command them. It's always like that. But there are features in this game that we call commitment, like commitment-based. Like, for example, when you're fighting in Ancestors Legacy, your squads are bound in combat, and you can't start combat and then go away and maneuver around the opponent, attack another opponent. Technically, you can retreat from the battlefield, but that means your squad is going to run away at least a couple 100 meters or so. But basically, we base a lot on commitment. So when you think about what you're going to do, when you plan your fights ahead, and when you engage your squad in a combat, you better be prepared, because then they're not going to react to you. Okay, so bad idea, I'm retreating. You can retreat, but they're going to run to the base. It's like running across the map to get to your base and get replenished. But this is a serious decision, so they're not always going to react the way you want. If you're used to a lot of features from a typical RTS, there are things that we wanted to do different, slight twist on the RTS formula. I hope people are going to like them. That's our design decisions.